Welcome to Madlik. My name is Geoffrey Stern, and at Madlik we light a spark or shed some light on a Jewish text or tradition. Along with Rabbi Adam Mintz, we host Madlik Disruptive Torah on Clubhouse every Thursday and share it as the Madlik podcast on your favorite platform. This Shabbat is Shabbat Shekalim, the first of 5 specially named Shabbatot that precede Passover. Today we'll discuss the meaning of this Shabbat in light of both Rabbinic and New Testament texts, and in the process, join our forebears in preparing for the spring awakening. So join us for Shekels Count. Well, welcome, Rabbi. Another week of Madlik Disruptive Torah, and unlike normal, where we do a parsha in the reading, the seasonal annual reading of the Torah, we are going to diverge a little bit and talk about the first of the 5 Shabbatot that precede Passover, Shabbat Shekalim. I think this Shabbat in your synagogue, you not only have Shabbat Shekalim, you have, Machar Chodesh? Is it Rosh Chodesh or the day before Rosh Chodesh?
No, it's the day before Rosh Chodesh.
And it's not that rare, and it's also Adar Sheni. It's a year where we have not only a leap year, I believe, in the secular calendar, but also in the lunar calendar. It's a lot going on, and it gives us, I think, license to go off-road a little bit and to look at what is the meaning of Shabbat Shekalim. We're going to start, as we usually do, with a Torah text, but we're going to look at it slightly differently because we're going to look at it through the lens of what about this text and this tradition made it the first of the 5 Shabbatot that literally take us to this amazing holiday. You could call it the New Year Festival. You could call it the Spring Festival. You can call it the Festival of Liberation. But it's Passover. I know it's you and my favorite holiday. So,
oh boy.
Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Okay. So in Exodus 30, and we've already probably covered this parsha in a previous time, it talks about this shekel. It says, God spoke to Moses saying, when you take a census, tisa et rosh, literally count heads of the Israelite men, according to their army enrollment, says my translation, lepikudehem, and a pekudah in modern day Hebrew is a military term. Each shall pay God a ransom for himself. Kofer nafsho. If you hear the word kippur and kapara and yom kippur there, it works. It is a redemption for the soul on being enrolled, that no plague may come upon them through their being enrolled. This is what everyone who is entered in the record shall pay, a half shekel by the sanctuary weight, 12 gerahs to the shekel, and it goes on, and it says, from the age of 20 up shall give God's offering. The rich shall not pay more. The poor shall not pay less than half a shekel when giving God's offering as expiation for your persef, kesef ha-kippurim. You shall take the expiation money from the Israelites and assign it to the service of the temple, al avadat ohel moed. It shall serve the Israelites as a reminder for God, as expiation for your person. So usually the rabbi will get up when this is read and talk about, we're running an appeal this week. Everybody's got to give. We want to count everybody in, and that's typically the lesson of the shekel, the half shekel. It's not how much you give, but you gotta be counted. You gotta be a part. There is nothing in here that links it to Passover, or that would seem to imply that this would be the beginning of the countdown to Passover. Am I right?
That is correct. That's only rabbinic, that idea that this machatzita shekel, this half shekel, was given in the month before Nisan as a preparation for Passover. It's like, when do you do the annual synagogue appeal? So in the temple, they did the annual synagogue appeal the month before Passover.
Great. So we're going to quote a few other biblical scriptural references, and then we're going to look at it through, as I said in the intro, through the eyes of the rabbis, and even through what the New Testament adds to our lens. So in Kings 2:12, it says, V'yomer Yoash said to the priests, all the money, current money, brought into the house of God as sacred donations, the money equivalent of persons, kesef nifashot erako, now it talks about the value of each person, or any other money that someone may be minded to bring to the house of the God. So this includes, let's say, if you made an oath, or if you had a birth, or whatever the reason, let the priests receive it, each from his benefactor. They in turn shall make repairs on the house wherever damage may be found. Et bedek habayit lekol asher yimtza sham bedek. So now already we're starting to see the idea is, I would say, evolving and is also increasing. Because originally when you read it, it was a way of counting people, counting who is of age for the military, and then anything to do with the temple service. I think the natural reflex would be for payment for sacrifices and other things. But now we get this wonderful term, bedek habayit, and I, because I have Passover on my mind, Rabbi, I'm starting to think bedikat chometz. Are the two words connected at all? That's a trick question.
That's a good question. Bedek habayit means that I don't know the answer. That's a good question. I don't know.
What I see in it is repairs to the house is this sense of kind of fixing things, getting ready, preparing things, making them better. And I don't know whether it connects to bedikat chametz, where we're looking to find the that which is old and leavened and getting rid of the stale. Anyway, let's go to Nehemiah. In Nehemiah 10, it says, the people of the land, Amei Haaretz, who bring their wares and all sorts of foodstuffs for sale on the Sabbath day, we will not buy from them on the Sabbath or a holy day. So he already is starting to talk about those Jews who are not keeping the ancient laws and are kind of bringing it down and bringing it into limchor et nokech mehem b'Shabbat, mekach umemcha, kind of commerce on the Shabbat. And it continues and says, we will forgo the produce of the seventh year. So it talks about the Shemitah. And then he goes, we have laid upon ourselves obligations to charge ourselves 1/3 of a shekel yearly for the service of the house of our God. And then he talks about what it's for, the rows of bread, regular meals, sins offering to atone for Israel, and for all the work in the house of our God. So this is kind of interesting. Here it doesn't talk about a half shekel. It talks about a 1/3 shekel. Just goes to show how traditions evolve and get changed, but it does bring it into a context of there's places where you shouldn't be doing commerce, where you should refrain from the mercantile, and then here is mercantile where you give to holy causes. I think we're starting to see that kind of tension between the misuse of money and the way that our businesses can impact our spiritual lives, and then how that 1/3 of a shekel or half of a shekel can be used for good. That's what I'm starting to see. I'm starting to see more ingredients in our soup, so to speak.
I love it. I like that. I think that's great. Yeah, good. Let's go with that.
So if we start looking at a Rashi, which as usual is really a lens into rabbinic tradition, he talks about, first of all, the interesting thing is there is definitely a focus, not on the monetary value of the coin, but on the fact that there is this shape of a coin. Over the last few weeks, we've had so many instances of the menorah coming down from heaven, of God showing Moses what the menorah looked like. And here too, Rashi says, God, showed him, Moses, a kind of fiery coin, the weight of which was 1/2 shekel, and said to him, like this shall they give. So Rashi is focused on zeh yitanu. And the point is, there's a need similar to today when we have a firstborn and we have to redeem it from the Kohan. You need, whether it's a silver coin, a silver dollar, you need some sort of iconic piece of coinage. It's not the value as much as it is that you need either a shekel or a 1/2 shekel, something that stands for something. I would say a standard.
Yeah, so that is a very interesting idea. Where did the idea of 1/2 shekel come from? Why did they choose a 1/2 shekel? Why didn't they just say a shekel? Why didn't they say the standard would be everybody gives $1? Why is it everybody gives 50 cents?
So I think the question is twofold. Number one, there's the shekel. Everything we're talking about is the shekel, and then it's a 1/2 of that shekel. So it's kind of like a tension, a dynamic between the whole. It's got to be a shekel, and then you only have to give 1/2 of it. And of course, again, getting back to the sermon that the rabbi makes in the fundraiser, you don't have to give it all. You don't have to complete the task, but you've got to be part of it. You've got to give it at least 1/2. But there's both here, but there's no question that there's a focus on this complete coin. Rashi in Exodus 30 says something, and I'm going to go a little bit of a tangent here because I have a personal story to tell. It says a shekel is 20 gerahs, and then it says only that they increased it the zuz. He starts talking about a zuz, and since we're starting to talk about Pesach, we all know Chad Gadya, Dizban Abba, Bitre Zuza, that we had a goat that my father bought for 2 zuzim. So I took a graduate course in Talmud at Columbia University from David Weiss Halivni, one of the great scholars of the Talmud. And it was before Passover, and he turns to us and he goes, what's the story with the zuz? What does the word zuz mean? So I raised my hand, and I just said, look, maybe it's because it's currency, and currency is zaz. It moves based on the market. So he said to me, no, that's not the reason. And he said the reason it's called a zuz is it's a slang for Zeus. Just like we now talk about a Franklin as a $50 bill.
That's amazing.
So I looked at Wikipedia, and it's in this Sefaria source sheet, and it says the first etymology it gives for Zeus is it's a corruption of the Greek Zeus. So it's the first time I ever saw his explanation. But the second one is Zuz means move or to move. So it's called Zuzimta. So it's constantly moving around. That here they say giving to charity. So I would say Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. But the point is that there was a fixation on using the prominent currency of the day to give to God, and then to take 1/2 of it. And I think that is something fascinating about the shekel story. Even today, in slang, we talk about, you better start saving your shekels if you want to take a trip like that. Shekels has lasted. It's in the nomenclature. It's in the way people think, and that's kind of interesting as well. Of course, course, the currency in Israel today is NIS, New Israeli Shekel. You can look it up. That is the currency today. So we use the shekel even today, and it's new. So that's good to know. So I want to go to the New Testament. And I want to do that for a number of reasons. But one of them is you probably have all heard of the story of Jesus going into the temple and throwing over the tables of the money changers. But the truth is, we all know when that happened. It's mentioned 3 times in the Gospels, and 2 of them are in the last moments of his life before Passover. So here in the New Testament is the first time we really get a sense that this shekel situation and changing the shekel and doing what was done had to do with the culmination, the movement up unto Passover. It was a key part of his story. This year, Shai Held from Hadar is coming out with a book, and it's called Judaism is About Love, Recovering the Heart of Jewish Life. And the premise of the book, I haven't read it because it's not out yet. Maybe if we're really lucky, we can have him on Madlik.
There you go. Okay.
But the point that he makes is that we got divorced from Christianity. And like in any divorce, we gave them certain things, they gave us certain things. And certain things that they took away, we wanted to have nothing to do with. And of course, love might have been one of them. But I will tell you that I always find in the New Testament, there are places where we can find our own history. And here is a situation where I believe, and this is one of the arguments I'm going to make tonight, is that we can a little bit hear an echo of what the shekel had to do with this this transition that we all have to make between now and Passover. So the story is pretty famous. In Matthew 21, it says, "Then Jesus entered the temple and drove out all who were selling and buying in the temple." That would be in Hebrew, mekach umemcha. "And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. He said to them, 'It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of robbers.'" And as we shall see, that's a quote from Jeremiah 7. "The blind and the lame," he continued, "came to him in the temple, and he cured them. But when the chief priests and scribes saw the amazing things he did and heard the children crying out in the temple and said, 'Hosanna to the Son of David,' they became angry, and he got kicked out." In Mark 11, it says, "Then they came to Jerusalem." Again, he was ole regel. He was doing what every other self-respecting Jew did at that time of year, which was coming up to Jerusalem. And he entered the temple and began to drive out those who were selling and those who were buying in the temple. He overturned the tables of the money changers. And again, he says, "Is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations, but you have made it into a den of robbers." And finally, in John, and by the way, in the New Testament, whenever they introduce these chapters, if I was giving a sermon on this chapter, the title would be "Jesus Cleanses the Temple." And obviously, we all know that part of the tradition that begins now is spring cleaning. It's cleaning things. It's getting rid of things for the holiday. We have the Persian Navuz. They empty out their house. All of this stuff, Lent, we have all of this cleaning. And as we might see, part of what Jesus was doing in terms of cleaning the temple of Mekach Umemcha was this kind kind, I believe, of cleaning. And so in John, it says the Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and the money changers seated at the tables. This case, he made a whip of cords and drove them out. And he said at the end, "Stop making my Father's house a marketplace." So as I said, in Isaiah, he's quoting standard sources. In Isaiah 56, you says, "I will bring them to my sacred mount. Let them rejoice in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and sacrifices shall be welcome on my altar, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples." In Jeremiah, it says, and he starts by again talking about all of the things that people do in the temple that are not appropriate. If you go, he talks about if you oppress the stranger, the orphan, the widow, if you do not shed the blood of the innocent in this place, if you do not follow other gods, and he goes on, will you steal and murder and commit adultery and fail swarthily, sacrifice to Baal, and then come and stand before me in this house that bears my name? And that's where he says the quote that Jesus has, "Do not consider this house which bears my name to be a den of thieves." Now, I have quoted in the Sefaria source sheet a scholar who has dedicated her life to interpreting the New Testament as a Jew. And her name is Amy Jill Levin. She actually has a version of the New Testament for Jews. It has all of the cross references to the Midrash and to whatever. And she has a long case to explain that even a den of thieves, that's not as though they stole in the place where their den is. They stole outside, and then they came to celebrate and to feel righteous about themselves. What Jeremiah and Nehemiah and all of these prophets are talking about is hypocrisy, is acting one way outside of the temple and then coming into the temple and acting another way. And she makes a case that this whole story has been misinterpreted, especially in the light of medieval Christianity's, I guess, oppression of Jews as money lenders. This is not talking about money lending. It's talking about changing money. People would come as tourists, as pilgrims from all over the empire, and they would come to the holy place to change their money. But what Jesus and the prophets were arguing about is those who were using this to cover up misdeeds, hypocrisy. And I think it's just fascinating that from, and only from possibly, the New Testament do we get a heightened sense that this is part of the preparation for Passover. And I just want your Rabbi to give me a sense of how you see Shekalim as being part of the preparation for Passover. We have Parah, we have Zeker Amalek, we have different things, but it really, we almost have to reclaim what about Shekalim made it as something that prepares one for Passover.
So I want to say, Geoffrey, first of all, that your explanation is great. I love the money-changing idea. Obviously, the idea of Jesus turning over the money-changing tables is among the most famous images in world religion. The rabbis explain it like this. Every day in the temple, there were communal sacrifices given. The daily sacrifice was called the Korban Tamid. On Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh and holidays, there was an additional sacrifice, the Musaf. And those were communal sacrifices. They were paid for by a communal fund. That communal fund was raised every year, and the fiscal year in the temple began on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the month of Pesach. And so therefore they spent the month before in the annual synagogue appeal. They raised the money the month before. And then they started using the money for the daily sacrifices starting at the beginning of Nisan. So therefore, every year, the Shabbat before Rosh Chodesh Adar, we read Shekalim to remind everybody, time for the annual synagogue appeal in the temple. And people have a month to pay up their pledges because we're starting to use the money for the korbanot. That's the That's the answer, the explanation the rabbis give. But I think your explanation is really interesting, and I think it allows us. It's like Shai Held says. It allows us to understand how the religions, Judaism and Christianity, are so closely tied to one another, how we share these common threads, the shkalim, the zuz. That's amazing. I never knew that from David Weiss Alivni. I learned something. I didn't take his class at Columbia College, but I learned something, and that's great. And this is just interesting, and I hope that everybody, as you listen to Parshat Shekalim this Shabbat, that these ideas are things that can percolate for us. And Geoffrey, if it's Parshat Shekalim, it means that Purim's around the corner and Pesach is just around 2 quarters. So I'm excited to enjoy these special Shabbatot together with you as we prepare for them, and to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom, Chodesh Tov. Rosh Chodesh of the second Adar is Sunday and Monday. We have a wonderful principle, Mishenichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha. When Adar begins, we celebrate. So everybody should be in a good mood. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom. And the only thing that I want to add, and I encourage you, Rabbi and I were at the Sefaria 10th anniversary dinner where they really celebrated 10 years of digitizing and indexing all of Jewish learning. One of the sources I give in the Sefaria source sheet links it again in another way to spring. In the Jerusalem Talmud, it says, what is the reason that they raised the money at this time? And Rabbi, you're correct, it was for the sacrifices and all that, but it was also to repair the roads, rural roads, which may have been damaged during the raising season. People were coming up in pilgrimage, and the roads and the infrastructure had to be prepared. Spring was in the air. All the fallen trees had to be cut down. It is a beginning of this, a celebration of spring. And the last thing that I'll say is it's just a few shekels. One of the things that is happening in Israel today, and we've tried to tie every week to the current situation, is there's a small bill about money to support the yeshiva students. And there are arguments, if you look at the most recent version of Inside Israel with Daniel Gordis, there are beliefs that the government will fall over this little symbolic tax diversion of money because the whole country has had enough of part of the population not carrying their load. And if you think about it, we started tonight with the half shekel was a way of counting heads for the army. And we're talking about repairing roads and how we're all in this together. And it's the simple shekel. So pay attention to the news. The government could fall over a simple shekel, and we will be a part of history. And we need to clean up our house for the new year. So I wish all of us that we should be now in the midst of the end of winter, preparing for this wonderful spring where anything is possible, and celebrate that shekel, celebrate our texts and our rich history, and Shabbat Shalom, and see you all next week. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Be well.